Hey, hello everybody. This is Jeff Kolcon, and we got our other partner here. I'll bring up Mike Bloomer. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm good, Jeff. How are you today?
Not too bad. I'm so excited. We've actually got a new podcast starting right now, and that is a junior hockey live. We're going to do this once a week, maybe more. And what we're going to do is we're going to highlight players. We're going to highlight leagues. We're going to talk about juniors from how they're playing, how they're performing, how they got there, and some other things like that. So been doing this for 35 years, master certified coach. I've been an NCAA coach, been a junior owner, general manager, coach. I've had kids come through, so I've got the parents' perspective on this too. And I also host the Junior Hockey Advisor podcast. And Mike and I work together. Mike, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So I grew up in the Detroit area, as you can see behind me. I live currently in the Chicago area. I've been here for about 20 years. I've been coaching at the U16 and U18, primarily the midget level, for the last 22 or so years. And I also work as a director of player personnel for a team in the North American League. Do a lot of different scouting and coaching, obviously, and looking to kind of share some of our experiences, some of our different connections and networking around all the different leagues, and highlight some of these players along the way.
Awesome. All right. So what we're going to do every week is we're going to highlight some leagues. We might not highlight them all in one day, but we're going to highlight some things going on in different leagues. We're going to put some things into context for you. So we'll attack different areas. I know Mike's got a couple leagues he wants to talk about today and some players. After that, I think we're going to spend a little time talking about the NHL watch list. And then I want to spend a little bit of time with you. And Mike, I'm throwing you for a loop because I just wrote all this down this morning. And we didn't talk about this ahead of time. I just want to talk about the USHL, which is one of Mike's leagues today, and what it's constructed of, some of the players and how they get there a little bit. And we'll spend a little time at that towards the end. And maybe a couple other things. We'll banter a little bit too. So, Mike, what leagues are we going to cover today? I kind of gave it away.
Yeah, you did. But yeah, there's a couple. What we typically like to do is we'll look at all the different leagues: the USHL, the NA, the NCDC. Some of the Canadian junior leagues, and what we're looking for is some good matchups, and that's what we want to showcase for all of you to kind of have an early look at what's coming up for that weekend, and then we can always go back and see if some of the players we thought were going to perform well actually did, or maybe they didn't. So for this current episode, we're going to look at the USHL first, and there's a really good matchup that's heading up this weekend with Green Bay, who's third in the division, going against Muskegon, who's fourth in the division. Both teams right now are pretty solid and competitive record wise. One is 6-5-1, that's Green Bay, and then Muskegon is 6-5, so one game less, but they're right there competing against each other for who's second and or third and fourth within the division. So looking at that matchup, we want to highlight a couple different players, and we think they're our picks to click for the weekend. So Green Bay, we want to focus in on Jimmy Clark, who's an 04 from Edina, Minnesota. He currently is tied for sixth in goals. He's tied for the leading goals with six, and he's also a University of Minnesota commit. So looking at his stats here, you can see he's just shy of a point per game, but he's scoring, at a clip of, a goal every two games. So he's off to a pretty good start. He has a ton of upside, ton of skill, obviously as a Minnesota commit. But in most of the games that I've watched, he's noticeable. And it's one of those things where I can't see him not being noticeable in this matchup. So he's the one guy for Green Bay we really want to key on, and think that this is probably going to be a good weekend for him as well.
Well, he comes from Edina. Anybody knows anything about Edina, that's a powerhouse. And usually, year after year, they're one of the top programs in the high school level. So it works a little different than the rest of the world on how the hockey works there. But awesome, very good. Look forward to seeing Jimmy this weekend and see how he does. Who do we have next?
Yeah, so for Muskegon, we want to focus in on Cody Kroll, who is he's an 03 from North Branch, Minnesota. So we got two Minnesota guys that we're highlighting. Cody had played his midget seasons with the North Star Christian Academy team. This is his first year in the USHL, and he's honestly off to a great start. So he's, just shy of a 1 point per game type player, which for a kid jumping into the USHL from midget hockey, that's pretty good for him to have that much production. And he's playing on a team in Muskegon that I think they've got 5 NHL drafted players on their team. So again, for him to just have this type of a start really says a lot about him and his ability. So I'm looking for him to, again, just continue to play the way that he has, which is contributing and, being effective in his game. He's not a guy that's going to necessarily jump off the screen when you're watching him, but he's so effective in the things that he does do, and it's why the points are following. He's a
I was going to
North
pull up their
Dakota commit.
roster in Muskegon, and where did you go? There you are, and see how many drafts they're showing. Yeah. So if you pull up Elite Prospects, you can see right next to the name 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
5 picks there. That's the easiest way to do it. You want to see if there's an NHL connection, just pull that up. If you see his background, just like you said, stayed close to home, North Star Christian Academy, played high school, and he's a big-time player. He should have a good weekend, hopefully, and let's see how this 03 does coming up. So good job. What do we got next?
Yeah, so now we're going to switch leagues. We're going to highlight a matchup here in the North American League. We're going to look at the Austin Bruins, who are first in their division, playing against Minot, who's number 2 in their division. What's interesting about this matchup is they just played each other last weekend. So they literally have back-to-back weekends home and away with each other.
How'd last weekend go?
Last weekend, Austin took it to Minot in both games. So the first game on Friday, Austin had won 4-3, and then on Saturday, 3-0. So this is Minot's chance to get back at Austin and climb back into the standings, because at the time they were neck and neck. I think they were tied for points, but Minot had a game at hand as last week started, and then obviously you can see how things kind of shook out after Austin won both that last weekend. But again, now they're heading to Austin, and now it's an opportunity for Minot to, hopefully push back on what happened. So that's one that we want to key in on. A couple players that we want to highlight first from Austin is Jim Gaffredo, who's a defenseman. He's an 03 from Mount Laurel, New Jersey. He's a kid here, as you're looking at his stats here as a defenseman, he's pretty close to a point per game. But, the thing that stands out about him is he's just a solid player. The puck seems to always be on his stick. He's always looking to distribute it to his forwards. He'll jump up into the play and try to create offense, but he's just solid. And that's kind of the best way to describe him, where there's not a whole lot of risk in his game. There's not a situation where I bet his coaching staff has any issues putting him out there. He just always seems to be doing the right thing, making the right plays, and obviously he's getting rewarded for it. So just having a steady defenseman, from all your years of coaching, they're so hard to find. And when you have them, you want to keep them as long as you can. So I think, highlighting him, over maybe a forward that has more points and things like that is just to say, he's just a rock back there that the team really relies on.
Well, he's a special. Garfredo's always been known as being a offensive defenseman, but he's also got a special teams touch. He's already got 2 goals on the power play, and I think he's racked up 3 or 4 assists on the power play too out of his 12 points. But hey, look, you're into game 16, and this kid is a defenseman, has already got 6 goals and 6 assists. That's incredible. And hopefully he can keep this up going forward.
Yeah, he's a Mount St. Charles product, so he's well coached, and watching him when he played midget and things like that, his offense wasn't as noticeable back then as yeah, no problem. I was just going to say his offensive upside, it honestly, watching him as a midget player, I didn't really see that in him, but he, like I said, he's just solid. So he's starting to figure it out. The way he moves along the blue line, the way he, gets pucks up to his forwards, and he's pretty steady on the power play. He's actually becoming a better point producer as a junior player than he was as a midget player. So, he's definitely one to kind of keep look at as he continues to develop.
Yeah, it's also a product that he went from Mount St. Charles and jumped over to the Boston Junior Bruins for a while. And good to see him make the jump and have success immediately inside of the Austin program. A lot of times what you'll see too is as a kid matures and gets older, their confidence goes up. We all know that. But even with the Junior Bruins, the playoff run he had last year, I remember, and I think it'll probably be on here too. Yeah, playoff run. They played 8 games. He had a couple goals and an assist in those 8 games, and I think that probably propelled him into his NAHL season because of how well he played in the playoffs. So, another good pick.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll see how that goes. And then for Minot, we're looking at a kid by the name Cooper Rice, who's an 02. He's a player from Rutland, Vermont. He actually played his last year's season in the MJ and, tore up that league and now has come over to play in the North American League. When you look at his points, I think they're actually fairly light. So sometimes you'll see kids when they go from, a huge point producer in a Canadian junior league or a different junior league, and then they come over to the NA, there is an adjustment period for figuring out the league. And there is differences when you kind of, look at not only the difference between the NA, but maybe the MJ, the AJ, the OJ, the NOJ, all these other junior leagues. It's different. And then there's differences within each division of the NA and things like that. So I think he's just at the point now where he's getting adjusted. He was really noticeable playing junior hockey last year. Like I said, he had a ton of points, played for a really good program. A little bit of a slower start, but again, he's an 02. He's got junior experience. I think it's just getting a little bit more familiar with the league and the level. And that's why I have him as my spotlight for this matchup, because I think this may be a weekend that he takes that next step and starts breaking out of his shell a bit.
Well, he's a big kid, 6'2", 194. Proctor Academy, what's interesting about this is we know that the NAHL isn't the first choice for prep, meaning, we're at best third choice, probably a solid third choice for most of the prep world on the East Coast. It's BC, USHL. You could argue that the BC gets a lot more because it's a run and gun style game, and he's not a run and gun style player. The NAHL fits him very well, so I think this would be a really good fit for him. He's been a big time kid from going way back. This is back when I was involved with youth hockey when he was playing for the Adirondack Junior Wings. That's back in 14 and 15. The kid was a big kid back then too. So good luck to him this weekend. I think he's going to do a good job. Anything else as far as catching up on the different leagues?
Well, the only thing I would highlight, which we're not going to do a player spotlight for, is just the another big matchup in the NA is the Lone Star Brahmas playing Shreveport Mudbugs, which anyone who follows the North American League, that's one of the best matchups that the league has to offer. So, those two teams throughout the records, it's going to be a slugfest, to till the final buzzer, because those two programs hate each other, and both programs want to make sure they're coming out of there with the win.
So there's a lot to unpack here on
yeah,
that
definitely.
matchup. They're both in the last 5 years. Shreveport's won the national title twice. Lone Star's won the national title once. That's part of the grind. They both feel like they should be winning national titles every year. Number 2 on this is you've got 2 of the most respected coaches in the league, and throw in the general manager for Shreveport, 3 of the most respected people in junior hockey, especially in all, but in junior hockey. We know Dan very well, Dan Waldfong, the current the active coach for Wins, even though Aberdeen's coach came back. The guys that are actively going, he had to start his clock back again. But he's second to only Aberdeen in most wins. But we've got a big time situation here. Both coaches played with each other for 7 years. The GM at Shreveport coached Dan in pro hockey for 7 or 8 years. They both are type A, want to win. They're different in style.
Right.
Dan is he is the World War II general that's on the front line with the cigar or the pipe, and he's going, go get them, boys. And he's slapping him with his white glove. What was that? Who was that general that MacArthur? Was it MacArthur or was it Ike? Who got in trouble for slapping the guy with the glove? The guy that was in the hospital.
I have no idea.
Patton. It was Patton. General Patton. It was the movie. It was a big scene in the movie. He got in trouble because he slapped. That's Dan. Not that he's going to slap anybody, but he's that general. Then you've got Soupy on the other side, Coach Campbell, who's he's much more of a player's coach, much more empowering of his assistant coaches in a different way, and much of a different demeanor. Still fiery, still hot when he needs to be, but just two different demeanors going at each other. So it's a great matchup to watch. Think of it this way. Shreveport's in the bottom third of the league right now. Lone Star's on, 11, 12, 13-game win streak right now? They're on top of the league as far as their points, as far as their winning percentage, goals against. They're firing on all cylinders. This is your classic Michigan State matchup. Doesn't matter where Lone Star is in the rankings. If Shreveport's on top and Lone Star's fourth, it's going to be a 1-goal game. Okay.
Yeah.
Right now, the other way around, you can't expect to walk in and see that game anything but a battle across the board. Right now, they're both loaded with solid players, but no breakout players yet. So, hey, time out from the podcast. This is Jeff Kolcon. Take the second to grab this podcast one-on-one with Jeff Kolcon, where I interviewed Dan Wildfong and cover the actual rivalry. It's a great podcast. We'll put it in the notes. Grab it and enjoy it. Let's get back to the podcast with Jeff Kolcon and Mike Bloomer. All of them are getting 3-line, 4-line production. Very good goaltending on both sides. So this will be a good matchup.
Definitely. That's
Listen,
one to
want to jump into
into.
something else. Want to jump into let's jump into this first. Since we talked USHL, let's bring the USHL up, and I just want to walk people through something that always comes up. Where do players come from? And here's one way you can do it. If you're on elite prospects and you've got the whatever the prime package is, I forget what it's called. They're $8 a month package. That's
the
premier package. Okay, so I've got the the USHL up here, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 times 4, 16 teams, including the National Development Program, which is right here. You can see the rankings. You got 8 and 8 across the board. There's only 16 teams. But here's something interesting. If you drop down to where these player stats are and you hit this green button,
you got to share your screen.
Oops. Very good. Always good to share the screen if I'm talking about this. Anyway, here's the USHL. What I did was just to back up and make sure everybody's on the same page here. The USHL, if I just type USHL in, come on screen. Now I'm going to get, okay, went one too far. All right, so there's the USHL, 8 and 8, 16 teams, including your National Development Program. If I slide down here to player stats and I hit this green button, what I can do is I can do some sorting. And one thing I can do is go has played. Now, this is interesting because people always want to know how many people in the USHL have, is the NAHL really an option? In other words, if I play in the NAHL, is that an option to get me to the USHL? And the answer is absolutely. And all you have to do is click on the button after you put the NAHL into has played. Then voila, you get a list of all the players that played in the NAHL that are currently playing in the USHL. Remember, there's only 16 teams, 104 players. Now we're gonna shorten that list a little bit, but 104 players that have played this year in the USHL have NAHL backgrounds. And you've got another 8 goalies, so 112 players. Now, to be more fair on this, because some kids come up, and get a game or two in, or they filled in, or they started up there for a game or two and then dropped. you can sort this down and get a true feeling of, okay, anybody that's got probably 8 to 12, 8 to 13 games, they're most likely up in the league right now. Now, let's use 10 as the number. So there's 48 kids out of that 112, plus whatever the goalies are down here. Looks like the goalies, hard to say with goalies because you could be on the roster and only have one game as a goalie. So let's leave that out. But out of those 104 players, about half are stuck on rosters. Now, there could be a couple other younger players, so I'd use the number as half. So there's a path from the NAHL to get to the USHL. Right now, 104 players have had their opportunity. Look at it that way. They've had their opportunity in the USHL this year, and they're affiliated with the NAHL. And I can do this with anything. I can jump down, go back up here to this, and I can put prep in and just type prep in and grab USHL high school, US high school prep, and then I can hit the button here. And what I can do now is I can look at all the prep players that came from the prep ranks, and there's 77 players and 5 goalies. So you're looking at about 80. Once again, I go up to games played. I can sort it from most games to least games, and you can see that number is pretty consistent. Out of the 70-something, 45, 50 kids are playing in the league. So I can do that with the BCHL. I can do it with the NAHL. I can do it with any group or team or league to see what percentage or the actual names of the players that are there. So if you're looking at leagues and going, well, I don't know about that. If you're worried about playing in the MJHL, if you're worried about playing in the AJHL, if you're worried about playing in the NCDC, one way to do it is to see where the players are coming from. How many of those players in the NCDC came from prep? How many of them come from Tier 1 Elite? How many of them come from the NAHL? How many drop down from the NAHL? So just an easy sort tool, and it's fun, and it's a good way to get your arms around junior hockey if you're trying to figure out where you're going to play.
Yeah, I think the nice part about this is, parents, players, even coaches in some extent have all this noise around them of what to do and where to go and this is a dead end or don't go here because of this.
Right.
To really sort through what's fact and what's opinion, going and doing what you just did, there's no gray area. Like these things actually happen. So, the teams and the transactions that are happening are all being mapped out through elite prospects. So it takes the opinion out of it, and it just basically gives you what path these particular players went through to get to where they're at. So, it's very helpful, and just knowing how to navigate that on your own is important because, again, there's so much noise out there. There's advisors, there's coaches, there's other parents that have had kids that have gone through this process before. There's parents who haven't, and they're all sharing what they think the best option is for, your kid or for you as a player. And having this tool to kind of go through it on your own is so important because you may look at one kid that made it through from, I don't know, League XYZ that ended up in the USHL. You can't use that as the rule. That's the exception to the rule.
Yeah,
and you can't think you're going to be the exception. If one kid
on the other side of that exception is the parent or the coach that goes, yeah, you don't have to worry about all that stuff. So-and-so played Tier 2 until he was 19 years old. And look at him. He's in the NHL. And they got, this look on their face. And what they don't realize is they're looking at the Quebec leagues as youth where they only show up as AA, and or they're playing in a AA league that's the only league in that area. Or, during the pandemic, they're playing on a AA team because there was no AAA options there. You can't build it on the one case. You follow the trend lines. Trend lines. You want to be on a top team. You want to be in a top league if possible, and you want to be a top player. That's how the game's played. If you can't be a top player, you want to still be in the top league on a top team. If you're not the top player is going to draw attention to you. Going back a few years, a longtime NHL player, NHL great, Stanley Cup champion, Brian Janta, played out of the Niagara Falls area when he was playing junior hockey. Started in Rochester, then outgrew Rochester, moved to the Buffalo, Niagara Falls area. Boston College came to watch one of his teammates. still got him a scholarship because he played really well. They took both of them, and he had an illustrious decade plus. I don't know how long he was in the league, but he was in the league a long time. But that's the situation. He wasn't the top player there. In fact, people were coming to watch the top player. He got picked up in that and actually had a better career coming across the board. I wished I remembered the player that I'd have to look at the roster, but I don't remember the player that they were coming to watch. But there's a perfect example of that. So,
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, let's jump on to something else. I want to talk a little bit about the watch list, the NHL. Basically, what it is the NHL comes out, and it's their central scouting for 2022-23. It's their preliminary watch list. They start at this time of year. Fairly accurate. They take about 250 to 350 players. They break them into A, B, and C, and it gives you an idea across the spectrum. This is worldwide, what the NHL thinks right now. Now, this is a snapshot. This stuff changes daily. It changes, they're accumulating all their information from scouts. They're trying to put it together to give the first look. Now, remember, central scouting has nothing to do with that. Central scouting is used by each team to see if they're missing a kid or if they've got it. But every team's got their own scouting staff. Every NHL team's got, a lot of money invested in having European Division I, U16 scouts, Canadian scouts, American scouts, sometimes just for one city,
Yep.
you'll see scouts. Now, I've got this screen up and I want to share it with you. This is the central scouting list. Now, what's interesting about this is the numbers. And the numbers break down at about major junior versus college versus European, 3 buckets. It's about a third, meaning there's a third of the players that are actually coming from the major junior programs, the 3 major junior programs, Quebec, Ontario, OHL, WHL, which is the Western League. That's the players that made a decision that they're not heading towards college. They're going to play as it's basically an internship for pro hockey. You assume you're going to play pro hockey if you go in that league. It's not always true, but that's the assumption. Versus the college kid that went through U16s, went maybe through prep, U18, Minnesota high school, went on to play, or Canadian midgets, went on to play, anywhere from 1 to 4 years of college hockey before they move on to pro. So a couple interesting things about this. Once again, bucket. Now, which league would you think has the best? Now, think of the leagues. You've got the OHL, the Western League, the Quebec League. You've got the USHL. You've got the BCHL. Of all those leagues, which league do you think has the highest average per team of all those leagues?
I used to think it was the OHL. Now I would say the WHL because I feel like a lot of players have been coming out of that league.
Fair, but wrong. It is the USHL. And the USHL has over 3 players on average. And I'm giving you quick numbers because I don't have maybe I do have my little sheet in front of me. If I do, I'll give you a little bit more accuracy on this. But since I was scouting and doing all my scouting sheets over the weekend, I don't know if I've got the actual sheet in front of me, but it's over 3 per team compared to the, I do have it. It's right here. The USHL, 4.37. I apologize. 4.37. Now, the whole Western Hockey League, all combined, major junior, when I say Western Hockey League, I meant to say major junior, including the Western Hockey League, the OHL, and Quebec League, it averages 1.72 per team. Okay, so you can say, well, that doesn't mean much to me because I know the W, like you said, the W is really hot right now. Okay, you take the W alone, it's 1.81. The OHL is just a slight bit ahead. It averages 1.84. So we're talking about players on this watch list. You have less than 2 players in major junior that make this list. That seems low. It is. The USHL with the NCDC, like I said, is 4.3. Some would argue, oh, that the national development programs, part of those 16 teams, that's not fair. Okay, so pull that out. The league without the national development program is still at 3.13. So they average one more player per team than the other teams combined, or the leagues combined, or individually. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The USHL as a league, you remember, there's only 16 teams in there, versus the OHL's got 20, the W's got 22, the Q's got 18. All combined, they've got 65. The USHL has 47 with just 16 teams. So think about that. They've got 65 teams, um, versus the 15 without the national development program. So I thought that was interesting. There's a lot of ways to break this down. There's a lot of information there. It is a moving list. It's a living list, but still fun numbers there. So, Mike, I would argue that if you have a chance to play in the USHL, um, and not thinking about it from a societal perspective, because listen, I get it. You grew up in Quebec. Maybe you always wanted to play major junior because you get a chance to, be a star in your area, especially because you can play young in those leagues too. You can play at 15. Maybe the OHL is so much different than what we know about junior hockey. It's iconic in small towns across Canada, and so
They're
if you
like
get a
mini
chance,
pro teams.
pardon, yeah, it's
They're like
exactly like
mini
that.
pro teams.
You're not only a local star, but sometimes you're a provincial star when you play on some of these teams. Versus, you can play for a USHL team and maybe not even get a big crowd. Chicago doesn't get very big crowds. Some of the teams in the national development program for a long time didn't get big crowds, and they still go up and down on their crowds. So you're not really recognized in your city. You might be recognized inside the hockey world if you play in the USHL, but not the same way. It's just not the same as playing in Canada. So set that aside. But if you're not sure where you fit in the hockey world and you're going up, why wouldn't you pick the USHL? Keep your eligibility there. I mean, when I say pick, you still have to be talented enough to make that league. You can't just say, I declare I'm a Bantam minor AA player. I declare I'm going to go play in the USHL. You can have that goal and aspiration, but you still have to make those teams. But if all things are equal and you have that choice, I'm always mystified about why an American would choose to play in the OHL and give up that eligibility.
Yeah, I think you raised some good points. I mean, I think the old narrative was always that, if you play in the major junior level, we talked about it being kind of like a mini pro team, but a lot of the old narratives were that they play a pro level schedule. The way that it kind of is organized and set up, and when those kids end up aging out of major junior, they're almost forced right into professional hockey. So sometimes it starts their clock faster of being a professional, and that's why they go. And at one point, I would imagine they were producing more NHL talent than the USHL was. So we're like stuck in that um, old school narrative, compared to where the numbers are showing where these players are. So again, it's just trying to I guess get that out there that the USHL is providing a ton of talent. I think we've seen the NHL teams get behind, assigning resources to their scouting teams to where they actually have a USHL scout, and in some cases, multiple scouts. So they're seeing it, and the numbers are showing it. So it's one of those things where if you're a player, you're right. I think if you're a Canadian, it's a hard pull to not go and play for one of those OHL programs if you live in Ontario, or if you're out west to play for a WHL program, which is fine because, that would be like somebody in Michigan getting the opportunity to play for the National Development Program or possibly Muskegon and staying local, so I get that
Fully get
draw.
it. Yeah, fully understand. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I think that old school network of people that are just entrenched in the OHL, entrenched in this is the way it's done. I played in that league. Those guys are starting to get pushed out by the younger guys that took the college route that got into scouting, younger guys that played 5-10 years in the NHL that came out of the USHL and maybe had a background an American path or Canadian path that just took them a little bit off that major junior route. The BCHL kids that make it big, the AJHL kids that make it big. I think that's the only way we're going to change the narrative there and actually go off facts versus just connections and old school thought mentality. So that's it. I didn't want to kill it, but I wanted to make sure we mentioned the list. We're not going to go through names on this. I will tell you that there's an A, B, and C on this list. And the A's, there's about 30 players. The B's, maybe 50 to 100. And the rest are C-level players. This does not mean you're going to get drafted if you're on this list. It does mean that you're being watched. Some teams spend very little time on this list, NHL teams. Other teams spend a lot of time with this list and make sure they scrutinize and they vet all these kids. Some are just confident in their own systems. Now, one thing I'd say, if you're a player and you see your name on this list, don't relax. Don't relax. You see a lot of guys, a lot of Americans that come on this list from a prep school or from U18 or from junior hockey, and they're on once and they're gone. And, you can't rest on the fact that you got on once. In fact, you got to work harder and be much more evident that you're pronounced above the rest. And if not, this doesn't mean anything. You might want to frame it for your men's league team to come over to have beers at your house and look at the list, because if you don't work hard after getting on this list, you're not going to do it. You're not going to make it.
Well, and I think the other point too is a lot of the people who work for the NHL, central scouting, they are regional with where they live, so they may get to see certain programs play more often. So they trust their eye and seeing, players in those programs succeed. And because there's a track record or maybe a pipeline that those programs have provided in the past, they will key in on a few of their new crew of guys. Whether they truly are better than some kid that, I don't know, maybe he's playing in the middle of nowhere, but is better, they're going to rely on, information that they had from relationships that they have, or again, if they've seen a certain team or program play more than they have this other player. So now that kid is on that central scouting list as a C player. It doesn't really necessarily always mean that of this complete list, if there's 300 names on it, these are the 300 best players. I think if you're around 1 through 25, there's
good.
not a whole lot of switching around there. There may be a few, but when you're somewhere between 200 and 300, there's probably a lot of variables there of why a certain player is on the list. And maybe
it's interesting too, as time goes on, 15, 20 years ago, Russia. And then all of a sudden, when the KHL came in, the NHL pulled away from watching Russia. But this list has a lot of Russian players on it. It went from Russia to Finland, Sweden, Denmark. These different areas started getting a lot more exposure because the KHL was drawing their Russian players into that league. And so the NHL backed away. In fact, I got a great video on it, USA Hockey, how it works. If you go to Junior Hockey Advisor, you can see that video. What's interesting about that, it tells the whole story about why we have the USHL designed the way it is, our national development program, Hockey Inc., which is a website that's a phenomenal website to get information on. All that, you can credit a lot of where we're at in the development. Some of the stuff was around before the KHL, but the KHL allowed the United States to pick up a lot of money that the NHL was spending over there. I highly recommend the video. I think you'll like it. It's called USA Hockey, How It Works. Go to Junior Hockey Advisor on either Facebook or onto YouTube, and you can pull that up. And you can catch a lot of the other videos that we do on Junior Hockey Advisor for instruction and other things too, if you go to Junior Hockey Advisor. And if you do, especially with this video, because it's a new live stream, it's a new podcast, like and subscribe to us, please. That'll help us a lot as we move on. Mike, where are you going to be this week?
I'm actually leaving tomorrow morning for Dallas. So they got the NAPHL showcase going on amongst all the different rinks down in the Metroplex down there. So my 16s and 18s will be playing in it. So hopefully I get a chance to maybe scoot away and not only see some North American League hockey, but also, some of the AAA teams that are playing. But again, I'll probably have 8 games this weekend between the two teams. So it's going to be crazy hectic from a coaching standpoint. But yep, I'll be in Dallas. How about you?
I actually got a light weekend. Last weekend was still gonna. I'm in Western New York. I'm just east of Rochester, where I live. So Buffalo is a home area to me. It's an hour and a half away, depending on where I'm going. Last weekend I was there, saw some fantastic U18 hockey. Got a chance to watch some of the prep teams that are playing at U18. Got a chance to see Bishop Kearney. Got a chance to see the Junior Sabres, Victory Honda, Bell Tire. Got a chance to watch the Reapers from your area a little bit. Not enough, but I saw some great hockey. I'm going back to Buffalo for their state. Our district for USA Hockey happens to be the state boundaries. So instead of calling it a district qualification, a lot of times they call it the state championship, or they call it the qualifiers for nationals. I'm going to go back and watch the Buffalo. It's in Buffalo. The New York teams play their qualifier games. So the split season, everything happens quick. So they're already playing qualifiers and doing all the things that teams do later in the year in other states and other regions in the United States. So home weekend for me, I'll probably get 4 games in, maybe 5 in this weekend, unlike last weekend where it was a lot more than that. And then the weekend after, still looking for it, Tier 1 in Detroit.
Of the teams that you saw this past weekend, who was the team you thought that had the most talent?
Oh, geez, there's so much equilibrium right now. I don't think, this is my opinion, I don't think that 04s and 05s carry the same talent level as some years prior. So I think we're condensed a little bit as far as, I don't think the talent's spread out as much as we've had in the past. But boy, oh boy, Maine has got a lot of really unique players on their roster. Bishop Kearney has got a lot of really, really interesting players with unique skill sets. I like their roster a lot. I saw extraordinary goaltending. Buffalo had really good goaltending. Victory Honda had really good goaltending. Maine had really good goaltending. There was maybe 6 goalies that, normally I go to these things and I pick out 1 or 2, but the goaltending is really, really strong at this level, at least from that snapshot of this last weekend. Victory Honda had a nice roster. Across the board, really, really nice. It was parity. There was a lot of 2-1 games. There's a lot of 2-2 games. There was a lot of games that came down to 1 goal in the last 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. So I liked a lot of the teams there. I'm not going to tip my hand because I work in the recruiting field. So don't ask me players because I'm not going to give you the top players. Well, I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about everybody else that might watch.
I'll get your list.
I promised it to you earlier this week. I just haven't got to it yet. So everything for me starts out still the old school way with lots of this, and then it goes from there onto the computer. I am not one of those guys that can sit and watch 30, 40 players over the weekend and have them in the computer right away. So I'll get around to it. So listen, everybody, thank you so much. Mike, great job. First podcast. Wonderful job. Yep. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Feel free to reach out. You can reach out to me through Junior Hockey Advisor. Just go to that site, message me through there. I have a Twitter account. It's Eyes on Ice. Get it? Eyes on Ice, scouting, recruiting. So you can go.
Very clever.
Yeah, real clever. Mike, how do people get a hold of you?
Coach Bloome. That's my handle on Twitter.
Coach Bloome. Twitter. I'll get those little things on the screen that, when I say those, they'll pop up, and I'll put that in post-production. Yeah, that's big talk there. Listen, thanks so much for tuning in. Once again, we'll do this every week. Like and follow us if you can, and make sure you check out our other videos and our other podcasts at Junior Hockey Advisor. Have a great day. We'll see you next week.